What would you do if, in a quiet village lost among the boundless swamps of Polysia, a family was discovered where, for generations, parents became brothers and sisters to their own children? Imagine a cold wind rustling through the tall pines surrounding a dilapidated wooden house standing at the very edge of the village of Sterymhi, a house that local residents don't approach even in broad daylight, and as darkness falls, they draw their curtains and lock their doors with every bolt. A house from which strange sounds emanate at night, something between the cries of children and the groans of the dying. We will delve into the story of the Kovalenko family, whose sinister legacy still haunts these lands. And if you are interested in such stories, where reality becomes scarier than any fiction, stay with us. It all began in the summer of 2018, when a young researcher from the Institute of Ethnography, Elena Sokolova, went on an expedition to the remote villages of Polysia. She was collecting materials for her dissertation on the folk beliefs and superstitions of this region. Elena had no idea that an ordinary scientific trip would lead her to a discovery that would turn her whole life upside down and make her question the boundaries between the rational and the inexplicable. One day, while making her way through a dense forest, she came across an abandoned village. This place was not on her map. Half-ruined houses, overgrown with moss and mold, seemed frozen in time. The silence was such that Elena could hear her own heart beating. The air was heavy, musty, with a hint of rot and something indefinable that evoked an instinctive revulsion. Sunlight, breaking through the crowns of the trees, fell in patches on the ground, creating a bizarre pattern of light and shadow. In the center of the village stood a house that had survived better than the others, a two-story house with carved window frames and a sloping roof. Something about this house caught Elena's eye. She slowly approached the porch. The steps creaked under her feet, as if warning of danger. The door was ajar, as if inviting her to enter. Overcoming a growing sense of anxiety, Elena crossed the threshold. Inside, the house turned out to be surprisingly well-preserved. A thick layer of dust covered the antique furniture. Faded photographs in wooden frames hung on the walls. The faces of the people on them were barely distinguishable, but something about them seemed strange, wrong. Elena took out her phone and took several pictures. In the corner of the living room stood a massive oak chest with forged hinges. The lid was closed with an old lock, but when Elena touched it, it unexpectedly clicked and opened, as if it had been waiting for her touch. Inside lay documents yellowed with age, old books, and a photo album in a leather binding. On the first page of the album, the Kovalenko family, 1932 to 1952, was written in a calligraphic hand. Elena carefully turned the page to a black and white photograph. A family was looking at her. A middle-aged man with a stern look, a woman with lifeless eyes, and 4 children of different ages. Their faces were strangely similar, as if the brothers and sisters were also parents to each other. Under the photo was the caption, Mikhail Kovalenko with his family, 1932. The following pages contained even more photographs of the Kovalenko family over 2 decades. With each year, the number of family members increased, but they all had the same facial features, the same empty eyes. And with each generation, these features became more and more distorted, wrong, as if nature was trying to correct a mistake, but only making it more obvious. Among the documents, Elena found a diary belonging, judging by the signature, to Mikhail Kovalenko. The diary was written in an Old Slavic dialect with a mixture of Ukrainian and Belarusian words, but Elena, who specialized in the linguistics of East Slavic languages, was able to decipher most of the text. What she read made her blood run cold. The diary began with an entry dated January 3, 1932. Today my son and brother were born in one person. The tradition continues. The strength of the clan grows with each generation. Soon we will achieve what we have been striving for centuries. True unity of blood and spirit. Elena turned several pages. The entries became more and more incoherent, as if the author's mind was gradually collapsing. The 12th circle has closed. Blood flows in a spiral. Children are born with marks. This is a good sign. The elders say that we are close to our goal. The neighbors are afraid of us. Let them be afraid. Their blood is weak and diluted. Our blood is as pure as on the day the world was created. Today a sacrifice was made. The earth accepted the gift. The harvest will be plentiful. The last entry was dated December 10th, 1952. They are coming for us, talking about diseases, about degeneration. They understand nothing. We are not degenerating, we are evolving, becoming something greater than just people. But time is short. We need to go deeper into the forests, or there is another way. The ancient rite requires a great sacrifice, but it will preserve the heritage. It is decided. Tonight we will perform the last ritual. Elena closed the diary, feeling a chill run down her spine. What happened to the Kovalenko family after this entry? What last ritual did they perform? And what became of the village? With these questions, she returned to the regional center and began her investigation. In the local archive, she found old newspapers from the 1950s. In the issue of December 15th, 1952, there was a short note. A fire occurred in the village of Stary Mhi. Several houses burned down. According to preliminary data, a family of 12 people died. The causes of the fire are being investigated. This was the only official information about the incident. It was as if the authorities wanted to forget about what had happened as quickly as possible. But Elena could not stop. She found the addresses of several elderly people who, according to archival documents, had been relocated from Stary Mhi in the 1950s. Most of them had already died, but one woman, Maria Petrovna Klimchuk, 95 years old, was still alive and living in a nursing home in a neighboring town. Elena went to her, hoping to get answers to her questions. Maria Petrovna was surprisingly spry for her age. Her eyes, faded by time, still retained a clarity of mind. When Elena mentioned Stary Mhi and the Kovalenko family, the old woman's face changed. Fear, long-standing but still alive, flashed in her eyes. Why stir up the past, girl? There are things that are better left buried, she said in a soft voice. But Elena insisted, and gradually Maria Petrovna began to speak. Her voice trembled, and her hands nervously fidgeted with the edge of the blanket. The Kovalenkos lived in Stary Mhi for as long as I can remember. They kept to themselves. They rarely went to the village, only when necessary. Their house stood on the edge, closer to the forest and the swamps. A big house, old. They said that it was built back in the time of the Tsar. Mikhail was a strange boy, quiet, always looked somehow through you. At 15, he became the father of his own brother. His mother, Anna, gave birth to a child from her own son. Everyone in the village knew but kept quiet, were afraid. The Kovalenkos had some kind of power over people, not witchcraft, no, something else. As if they knew something about everyone that was better kept secret. With each year, they had more and more children. Strange children, as alike as two peas in a pod, with the same empty eyes. Some were born with deformities, extra fingers, fused limbs, without nails or hair. Others looked normal, but did not speak or could not walk. They were never seen at school or in church. People whispered that the Kovalenkos were performing some kind of rituals at night, that strange sounds came from their house, singing unlike any known melody, moans, children's cries, and sometimes a silence so deep that it seemed as if the very air had frozen. In 1945, when the war ended and the Soviet authorities returned to our region, some people in uniform came to the Kovalenkos. There were rumors that they were doctors or scientists. They spent several days in the Kovalenko house and then left. After their visit, Mikhail became even more withdrawn and rarely appeared in public. And then children began to disappear, first from neighboring villages, then from our own. No one could prove the Kovalenkos' involvement, but everyone knew, everyone felt it. When little Petya, the blacksmith's son, disappeared, the men decided to go to the Kovalenko house, but they didn't make it. That night, there was such a thunderstorm that even the old-timers couldn't remember anything like it. Lightning struck directly into the ground, and the wind was so strong that it tore trees out by the roots. And then there was the fire. December 10th, 1952. I remember that date because it was my brother's birthday. Fire engulfed the Kovalenko house, suddenly, as if it had burst into flames from all sides at once. No one tried to put it out, no one tried to save those who were inside. The flame was a strange color, not red or orange, but bluish-green. And in that flame, I swear to all that is holy, I saw figures. They stood motionless, holding hands, forming a circle, and they didn't scream, didn't try to break free. They were singing. Maria Petrovna fell silent, lost in thought. Her hands trembled even more. After the fire, the authorities conducted an investigation. Officially, they announced that the cause was a faulty stove. Bodies were found, but it was impossible to determine how many. The remains were buried in a mass grave behind the village without a funeral service. And a month later, an order came for resettlement. Stary MHI was declared unsuitable for living due to waterlogging. All residents were distributed to neighboring villages and towns. The houses were demolished except for a few, including the Kovalenko house. No one knows why it wasn't touched. But the story didn't end there. The old woman continued after a pause. Several years after the resettlement, rumors began to circulate that people had been seen in Stary MHI, not ghosts, but living people resembling the Kovalenkos. Hunters, mushroom pickers, and casual travelers said that they had met strange children with empty eyes in the forest. The children didn't speak, only looked, and then disappeared between the trees. And they also said that if you come to the ruins of the Kovalenko house on a full moon and listen, you can hear singing, the same singing that sounded on the night of the fire. And if you listen to it long enough, you begin to understand the words in a language that does not exist in our world. Elena listened to Maria Petrovna's story, feeling goosebumps run down her skin. The story seemed incredible, like a village legend, but Mikhail Kovalenko's diary and the photographs she had found confirmed that the family really existed. Maria Petrovna, what do you think happened to the Kovalenko family? Did they all really die in the fire? Elena asked. The old woman looked at her with a long gaze, as if assessing whether Elena was ready to hear the truth. I don't know, girl, no one knows, but I'll tell you this. A year after the fire, my cousin worked in the district hospital, and one night they brought in a woman, pregnant, about to give birth. She was having a difficult birth, the child was coming out the wrong way. When it finally came into the world, the midwife screamed and fainted. The child had two faces, one in the front as it should be, and the other on the back of its head. Both alive, both blinking and looking around. The woman called herself Anna Kovalenko, the same Anna, Mikhail's mother, who supposedly died in the fire, only she didn't look her 60-something years, but 30 at most. After giving birth, she disappeared from the hospital along with the child, simply vanished into thin air. The hospital staff were forbidden to talk about this case under threat of dismissal, but rumors still leaked out. Since then, every few years similar cases occur in different hospitals in the region. A woman calling herself Anna Kovalenko gives birth to a child with abnormalities, and then disappears. And these children always resemble those in the photographs in some way. The same facial features, the same empty eyes. Maria Petrovna suddenly grabbed Elena's hand. Her fingers were dry and cold as a dead man's. Listen to me, girl. Forget about the Kovalenkos. Burn the diary, destroy the photographs. Don't go to Stary MHI, especially at night. There are secrets that are better left unrevealed. There are doors that are better left unopened. The Kovalenkos did not die in that fire. They changed, became something else, and they are still there in the forests and swamps around Stary MHI, waiting, watching, growing. After this conversation, Elena should have listened to the old woman's advice and abandoned her investigation, but scientific curiosity and the desire to get to the truth were stronger than fear. She decided to continue her search and turned to official sources. In the regional archive, she requested access to medical reports and studies conducted in the region in the 1940s and 1950s. After several days of waiting, she was granted access to some of the documents. Most of them concerned ordinary epidemiological studies and morbidity statistics, but one report caught her attention. The document was titled "On the Question of Genetic Anomalies in Isolated Populations: The Case of Family K from Village SM." The report was compiled by a group of scientists from the Institute of Experimental Medicine and dated September 1945. The names were encrypted, but Elena had no doubt that it was about the Kovalenko family from Stary MHI. The report contained a dry scientific description of the examination of family members, including physical measurements, blood tests, and other medical tests. Particular attention was paid to genetic anomalies caused by consanguineous marriages over several generations. The study subjects demonstrate a unique set of genetic mutations not previously described in the scientific literature. The report stated, accelerated evolution of certain regions of the genome is observed, especially those responsible for the development of the nervous system and sensory organs. The most remarkable case is that of subject MK, 15 years old, who was found to have abnormal activity in areas of the brain that are usually inactive in Homo sapiens. This was followed by a description of various physical anomalies in family members, from relatively harmless ones like polydactyly, extra fingers, and heterochromia, different colored eyes, to more serious ones, such as anomalies of internal organs and skeletal structure. Of particular interest is the phenomenon of synchronization of physiological processes between family members. Cases have been recorded when the heart rhythms, brain waves, and even hormonal cycles of several subjects spontaneously synchronized without an apparent external cause. This phenomenon requires further study, as it may have significant implications for understanding collective biological processes. The last section of the report was devoted to recommendations. Given the uniqueness of this case and its potential value to science, it is recommended that observation of family K continue under natural conditions. Isolation or relocation of subjects may disrupt the observed processes. However, it is necessary to establish control over the birth rate in this population, as the current growth rate and degree of genetic change may lead to unpredictable consequences within the next 2 to 3 generations. The report ended with the signatures of 3 scientists. Their names were familiar to Elena from medical history textbooks. All 3 subsequently became famous geneticists and made significant contributions to the development of Soviet science, but nowhere in their official biographies was there any mention of the study of the strange family from the Polzian backwoods. Attached to the report were photographs of the Kovalenko family members taken during the examination. They were clearer than the ones Elena had found in the album and allowed her to better examine the anomalies. One of the photographs showed a 15-year-old Mikhail. His face looked almost normal, except for his unusually wide-set eyes and the absence of eyebrows. But there was something in his gaze that made Elena uneasy, as if behind the outer shell of a human being there was something completely different, watching the world with cold curiosity. Elena's next step in the investigation was to study the history of the region before the appearance of the Kovalenko family. In the university library, she found a rare book, Ethnographic Essays of Polesia, published in 1897. It contained descriptions of local customs, beliefs, and legends collected by the author during an expedition through the region. One of the chapters was devoted to ancient cults and pagan rites that had survived in remote villages even after the adoption of Christianity. The author described a strange ritual he observed in a village, the name of which was not indicated, but based on the description of the area, it could be assumed that it was the area of Stary MHI. On the night of the summer solstice, local residents gather at a sacred spring located deep in the forest. This place is remarkable in that the water in the spring has a reddish tint due to the high iron content, which gives it a resemblance to blood. According to local beliefs, this spring is a gateway to the world of spirits, and the red water is the blood of the earth. The rite begins with the elder of the clan cutting his palm and allowing a few drops of blood to fall into the spring. Then, the rest of the participants do the same, starting with the oldest and ending with children who have reached the age of 7. At the same time, words are spoken in a dialect so ancient that I could not decipher their meaning. After that, the participants drink water from the spring mixed with their own blood. According to their beliefs, this creates an unbreakable bond between the members of the community, making them a single organism capable of feeling each other's pain and joy. The connection between blood relatives who participated in the rite is considered to be particularly strong. It is said that brothers and sisters who have gone through the ritual can communicate without words and feel each other at a distance. The most disturbing aspect of this cult is the encouragement of marriages between close relatives, which is justified by the need to preserve the purity of blood and strengthen the mystical connection. Local residents claim that children from such unions possess special abilities. They can see the future, communicate with spirits, and even heal diseases with the touch of their hands. The scientific explanation for these beliefs probably lies in the consequences of inbreeding, which can indeed lead to the appearance of unusual physical and mental characteristics in offspring. However, from a medical point of view, this practice is extremely dangerous and leads to the degeneration of the clan. It is sad to see how ignorance and superstition force people to act against their own well-being and the health of future generations. Elena closed the book, feeling the pieces of the puzzle begin to come together. It seemed that the Kovalenko family were followers of this ancient cult, preserving its practices even in the 20th century. But something went wrong. The genetic mutations that had accumulated over generations reached a critical point, and the final ritual mentioned in Mikhail's diary was apparently a desperate attempt to cope with the consequences. But what was this ritual? And did the whole family really die in the fire? Or, as Maria Petrovna hinted, did they somehow survive and continue their lineage to this day? To find answers to these questions, Elena decided to do what the old woman had warned her against. Return to Stary MHI. This time she prepared better, taking with her a supply of food and water, a flashlight, a compass, and a satellite phone in case of an emergency. She also informed her colleagues where she was going and promised to contact them in 24 hours. Arriving at the abandoned village, Elena found that the Kovalenko house looked different than it did during her first visit. Perhaps it was a trick of the light and shadow, but it seemed to her that the building was in better condition. The roof was not as sloping, the windows were intact, and the door was tightly closed. A strange feeling, as if the house was alive and could change its appearance, did not leave Elena as she approached the porch. This time, the door was locked. Elena carefully walked around the house, looking into the windows. Inside, everything looked the same as the first time. Antique furniture covered with dust, faded photographs on the walls. But something had changed. It took her a few minutes to realize what it was. The chest in which she had found the diary and photo album was open. The contents were scattered on the floor, as if someone was hastily looking for something specific. Elena found a broken window at the back of the house and, exercising caution, climbed inside. The air in the house was heavy and stale, with a hint of dampness and something else Swedish and nauseating. She turned on her flashlight and looked around. Tracks in the dust indicated that someone had been here very recently. Approaching the scattered documents, Elena noticed that most of them were in place, including the photo album, but Mikhail's diary was missing. Had someone taken it? Did someone from the Kovalenko family really still live in these places? Or were curious researchers like herself visiting here? Elena spent several hours in the house carefully studying the remaining documents and photographs. She took many pictures on her phone to analyze them later in a calm environment. Among the papers, she found a schematic drawing resembling a map of the village and its surroundings. On the map, a cross marked a spring in the forest, probably the same one that the ethnographer wrote about in his book. Elena decided to find this spring. According to the map, it was located about 2 kilometers north of the village, deep in the forest. The sun was still high and she expected to be able to return before dark. The forest greeted her with silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional cries of birds. The trees here grew very densely, their crowns intertwined, creating a green twilight even on a clear day. The soil under her feet was soft and moist, in places turning into a real swamp. Elena carefully watched the trail, trying not to lose her way. The deeper she went into the forest, the stronger the strange feeling became that she was being watched. Sometimes out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement between the trees, but when she turned around, there was no one there. The birds fell silent and the silence became oppressive, pressing on her ears. Finally, she came to a small clearing. In the center of it, a spring gurgled from the ground, forming a small lake with water that was truly reddish in color. Around the spring stood ancient moss-covered stones, forming an uneven circle. The stones were covered with strange symbols, not runes and not Cyrillic, but something resembling a mixture of the two. Elena came closer, took out her phone, and began to photograph the symbols. Suddenly, she heard a twig snap behind her. Turning sharply, she saw a child standing on the edge of the clearing. A boy, about 10 years old, dressed in an old-fashioned shirt and pants that were too big for him. His face was pale, with wide-set eyes and thin lips, features that Elena had already seen in the photographs of the Kovalenko family. "Hello?" she said cautiously, trying to keep her voice calm and friendly. "What's your name?" The boy did not answer. He stared at her unblinking, with empty eyes that reflected no emotions. "Do you live here, nearby? Where are your parents?" Elena continued, slowly approaching the child. The boy remained silent. Then, when Elena was a few steps away from him, he suddenly smiled. The smile was unnatural, too wide for a human face, and the teeth, there were too many of them, and they were sharp as a predator's. Elena froze, paralyzed with horror. The boy reached out and pointed to the spring. "Blood calls to blood," he said in a voice that seemed too old, too deep for a child his age. "You have come to us, so you are part of us." Who are you?" Elena stammered. "I am Mikhail and Anna and all who were before us and all who will be after," the boy replied, continuing to smile his hideous smile. "We have been waiting for you. You found our diary, read our thoughts. Now you carry us within yourself." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What does carry us within yourself mean? She instinctively took a step back, but tripped over a root and fell, hitting her head on a stone. She lost consciousness for a moment. When she came to, the boy was gone. The sun was setting, painting the forest in shades of red. Elena hastily got to her feet, feeling a pain in the back of her head. Touching her head, she found that her hair was sticky with blood. She had to get back to the village before it got dark. Elena quickly took a few more pictures of the spring and the symbols on the stones, and then hurried back along the path she had come. But soon she realized that she was lost. The forest seemed to have changed. The trees had become taller and denser. The trail had disappeared. Panic began to take hold as darkness fell, and she realized that she might have to spend the night in the forest. Suddenly, a light flickered between the trees. A light, like a lantern or a candle, moved between the trunks, sometimes approaching, sometimes receding. Elena decided to follow it, hoping that it would lead her to people or at least to the edge of the forest. The light led her through the thicket, winding between the trees. Sometimes it disappeared and Elena stopped in panic. But after a moment, the light reappeared, as if he was expecting her. She didn't know how much time had passed, minutes or hours, but at some point, the outline of a building appeared ahead. It was the Kovalenko house. Elena stopped, hesitant to approach. The house was not at all as she had seen it during the day. It was as if it had come to life. The windows glowed with a warm, yellow light, smoke rose from the chimney, and a figure of a person holding a lantern stood on the porch, the very light that had led her here. It was an elderly man with a long, gray beard. His face was etched with wrinkles, but his eyes, the same empty eyes as the boy in the forest, watched intently and keenly. "Come in, daughter," he said in a hoarse voice. "The night in the forest is not for the living." Elena understood that entering the house was dangerous, but staying in the forest, wounded and lost, was even more frightening. Besides, it was her only chance to learn the truth about the Kovalenko family. "Who are you?" she asked, slowly approaching the porch. "You know who I am," the old man replied. "You read my diary. You were at our spring. You shed your blood on our land. Now you are connected to us, Mikhail," Elena said hesitantly, remembering the photographs of the 15-year-old boy from the diary. "But that's impossible. You must be over 100 years old." The old man laughed a dry, creaking laugh that sent shivers down Elena's spine. "Time flows differently for us, daughter. Come in, I will tell you our story, the real story." Elena stepped onto the porch and entered the house. Inside, it was not at all as she had seen it during the day. Instead of dust and desolation, there were clean floors, furniture polished to a shine, and burning candles in antique candlesticks. People sat at a long table, men, women, and children of various ages. They all turned to her as she entered, all with the same empty eyes, all with the features of the Kovalenko family. My family, Mikhail introduced them. What's left of it after the ritual? Elena looked around at those present. There were about 20 of them, but something about them was strange, wrong. She couldn't understand what it was until she looked more closely. Some had visible anomalies. Extra fingers, strange body proportions, unusual skin color. But there was something even more fundamentally wrong with their appearance, as if they weren't quite human. What happened to you? Elena asked, feeling her heart pound in her chest. Mikhail pointed to a chair, and she sat down, unable to resist his gaze. In 1952, we realized that our experiment had gone too far. He began, sitting opposite her. Generations of inbreeding led to mutations that we could not control. Children were born with increasingly serious defects. Many died in infancy. Others survived, but were wrong, not as we had originally planned. The goal was noble. We wanted to create a new kind of human, stronger, smarter, able to feel and understand what is inaccessible to ordinary people. We followed ancient knowledge passed down in our family from generation to generation. A blood ritual at a sacred spring, marriages between relatives to preserve the purity of the line, special exercises to develop hidden abilities of the brain. And we achieved some success. Some of us could communicate without words, feel each other's pain and joy at a distance. Others saw the future or the past. Still others could influence the thoughts of others, making them do what we needed. But the price was too high. With each generation, there were more and more defects, and when Soviet scientists came to study us in '45, we realized that our time was running out. They wanted to take us away to study like laboratory rats. We couldn't allow that. Then I found in the ancient texts a description of a ritual that could save us. It required a huge sacrifice, but gave us a chance to continue the lineage in a different form. On December 10th, 1952, on the night of the full moon, we all gathered together, 27 people, from 1-year-old babies to 80-year-old old men. We drank a decoction of herbs gathered in the swamps and began the ritual. What kind of ritual was it? Elena asked, unsure if she wanted to know the answer. Mikhail looked at her with a long gaze. We became one whole, he replied after a pause. Not metaphorically, literally. Our bodies, our minds merged into one. We became one being with 27 bodies. Each of us still had his or her own physical body, but the mind, the consciousness became common. We saw through each other's eyes, thought as one organism. But the ritual had consequences we did not foresee. Our bodies began to change. First, the internal organs were rearranged, the tissues transformed. Then the changes became visible externally. We were no longer human in the full sense of the word. We became something else. People in the village noticed the changes. They were afraid of us before, but now fear turned into hatred. They came with torches to burn us. We did not resist. Fire was part of the ritual. Cleansing, transformation. We sang embraced by flames, completing the transition. But we did not die, not all of us. Some of us retained a human appearance and were able to leave. Others changed so much that they could exist in other forms, as shadows, as spirits of the forest, as something that does not have a permanent physical form. We scattered around the world, but part of us always remained here, in the old mosses, preserving memory and continuing the lineage. And now you are here. Mikhail leaned closer to Elena. You didn't find us by chance. Blood calls to blood. There is something of us in you, otherwise you would never have been able to find the house and read the diary. Perhaps one of your ancestors was connected with our family. Perhaps this manifested itself through many generations, but the connection is there. And now, when you shed your blood on our land, it became stronger. Elena felt a shiver run down her body. She remembered her grandmother, who came from these places. Her grandmother never talked about her family, and when Elena asked, she always changed the subject. Could she have been somehow connected to the Kovalenkos? What do you want from me? Elena asked, feeling fear replaced by a strange calmness, as if part of her knew that this was supposed to happen, that her path had always led here. Mikhail smiled with the same unnaturally wide smile as the boy in the forest. "We want you to help us," he replied. "Our lineage is degenerating. There are fewer and fewer of us. We need fresh blood, blood that is related, but not spoiled by generations of inbreeding. Your blood. You want me to have a child with one of you?" Elena felt nauseous. Mikhail laughed. "No, daughter, we have long outgrown such primitive methods of reproduction. We want you to become one of us, part of our collective consciousness, so that your mind, your genes, merge into our common gene pool. This will give us new strength, new opportunities, and you immortality and knowledge that you never even dreamed of." Elena looked at the people sitting at the table, or those who were once people. They looked at her with anticipation, with hunger in their eyes. She suddenly realized that they had been waiting for her, or someone like her, for many years, waiting to continue their lineage, their experiment. "What if I refuse?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. "You can't," Mikhail replied simply. "The process has already begun when you shed blood at the spring. You already feel the changes, don't you? A strange calm instead of fear, a feeling that everything that is happening is right, inevitable. You already hear our thoughts, our voices in your head. Soon you will become us, and we will become you." And Elena really felt it, as if new corners, new rooms, had appeared in her mind, in which other people's memories, other people's personalities lived. She saw in flashes the swamp, Polesia, the beginning of the 20th century, the ritual at the spring, the birth of children with anomalies, the fear and hatred of neighbors, the fire in 1952, decades of wandering in search of new carriers for their genes. "Don't resist," Mikhail said softly, seeing her inner struggle. "Let it happen. You will live forever in different bodies, in different forms. You will see how the world changes, how humanity evolves, and you will be part of the next step of this evolution." Elena felt her consciousness clouding over, her own personality blurring, merging with many others. She tried to resist, clinging to memories of her life, her parents, friends, studies, but these memories seemed more and more distant, unreal. In a final effort, she jumped up from the chair and rushed to the door. No one tried to stop her. Running out of the house, she raced away, not knowing the way. The forest was dark, but somehow she saw the path, as if her eyes had adapted to the darkness. She ran until she was exhausted and fell to her knees on the shore of the swamp. The moonlight was reflected in the dark water, creating bizarre patterns. Elena bent down to wash herself and saw her reflection and screamed. Her eyes had changed. They became as empty, lifeless, as those of Mikhail and all the members of the Kovalenko family. And when she opened her mouth in horror, she saw that her teeth had also changed, becoming sharper, more numerous. The transformation had begun. The expedition of the Institute of Ethnography sent to search for the missing graduate student Elena Sokolova discovered her belongings in an abandoned house in the forest near the now non-existent village of Stary Mkhy. Elena herself was not found, despite extensive search efforts that lasted more than a month. Among Elena's belongings was a tape recorder with recordings of her research and interviews with local residents. The last recording, dated the day of her disappearance, contained only strange sounds resembling singing in an unknown language and a short phrase spoken in a female voice, presumably by Elena herself. "Blood calls to blood. We are waiting for new ones. The circle must close." A year after Elena's disappearance, a patient was registered at the regional hospital of a neighboring city who was admitted with premature labor. The woman called herself Elena Kovalenko. After giving birth, she disappeared, leaving the newborn child behind. The child had numerous congenital anomalies and died a few hours after birth. A DNA test revealed genetic markers not found in modern humans. Every few years, similar cases are repeated in different hospitals in the region. A woman calling herself by different names, but always with the surname Kovalenko, gives birth to a child with anomalies and disappears. Medical samples show similar genetic abnormalities that defy classification by modern science. Local residents avoid the area of the old mosses and the stories associated with it. Hunters and mushroom pickers avoid these places. The few daredevils who still wander there tell stories of strange children with empty eyes who can sometimes be seen between the trees. The children do not speak. They only look and smile unnaturally wide smiles. And if you listen closely, on a full moon you can hear singing in a language that does not exist in our world. Some claim that if you listen to the singing for a long time, you begin to understand the words, and then you can no longer return to your former life because blood calls to blood, and the circle must close. In 2022, a group of researchers from the Institute of Genetics became interested in cases of unusual births in the region. They collected DNA samples and conducted an analysis. The results were so unusual that they were classified. But one of the scientists involved in the study said in a private conversation, "If what we have discovered is confirmed, we will have to revise all our ideas about human evolution. These are not just mutations, this is something else, as if a new species has emerged within our own." A month after this statement, the scientist resigned from the institute and moved to a small village near the old mosses. Contact with him was lost. According to unconfirmed reports, he had a child with unusual genetic characteristics. And on the full moon, local residents hear singing in a strange language from his house, the same language that is sung in the forests around the old mosses. Blood calls to blood. The circle closes again and again, and the Kovalenko family continues its lineage, its experiment that began almost 100 years ago. Evolution does not stop, and who knows what we will turn into in a few generations. Perhaps the children with empty eyes living in the forests of Polysia already know the answer to this question. If you ever find yourself in those parts and hear strange singing, do not listen to the words. And if you see a child with empty eyes, do not look into them for too long, because who knows, maybe there is a part of the Kovalenko blood in your blood too, and then the call will be too strong to resist. Blood calls to blood, and the circle must close.